Welcome, Jeff.
Hey.
Hey. Your first time to Sweden?
No, I've been here before.
Okay, great.
Love it here.
And your 15 seconds description of Stockholm would be? Nah, we'll think about that later on. And,
well, all right, I'll tell the story. So, strange but true. I went and visited the first IKEA in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I said that any nation that can produce that, I've got to go see. So my wife and I came here on vacation, honest to God, because of that. And I'm one of those horrible Americans Anita talked about. I speak 1.1 languages. The 0.1 is German, very bad German. And so on the way over, I try to be responsible. I got my little phrase book. We don't need that now. We have Google Translate. And I learned some things. The only thing I remember is this. See if I get it right. Jag skulle vilja ha en omelette.
That's pretty good. You would...
There's one problem with that. I don't like omelets.
Okay.
But so I'm very, very delighted to be here. I love the city. I'm very delighted to speak to you. Jag talar inte svenska. So I'm very honored that you are so smart about this and willing to have a conversation in English.
Right, and we're happy to have you here. And well, take it away.
Okay, thank you. I come here to warn you about danger to the internet, and I'm worried about that. And I come as proud to be in Sweden, I think, because it's a country that is so firm in protecting freedoms. But I think we see a lot of efforts to regulate the net coming up. And that frightens me, because the net is this great tool of publicness. It is a Gutenberg press in every one of our pockets. And so that's why I wrote this book, Public Parts, to extol the values of being public, the value of being able to find, form, and act as publics. And the tool for doing that is our net. Now, to do that, I had to kind of get through a notion of privacy. And I want to emphasize that privacy and publicness are not opposites. They're not at war with each other. We need both. It's a radio host in Canada said private and public are like hot and cold or wet and dry. It's a continuum. And so privacy matters. I have a private life. Even after I wrote about my prostate cancer and my malfunctioning penis online, I still, believe it or not, have a private life. Privacy needs protection. Indeed, I think it has more protectors today than perhaps it's ever had. But as I look back at the history of privacy, I found to my surprise that the first serious discussion of a legal right to privacy in the United States did not come until the year 1890. And the reason for that was the invention of the Kodak camera. It freaked people out. You could take a picture of somebody, and that picture could appear in the penny press, and everybody could see it. My God, what are we going to do? The New York Times at the time had stories about fiendish Kodakers lying in wait, about a young Vanderbilt horsewhipping a Kodaker who dared to take his picture, about President Teddy Roosevelt banning Kodaking in Washington parks. What was happening there is a little bit of what we see today. A new technology comes, it changes how we live, we have to adjust our norms to that. And until we do adjust our norms, we're freaked out about it. Douglas Adams, the author, said that anything that's invented before you are born is normal. Anything invented before you're the age of 30 is really cool, and you probably make your career out of it. Anything invented after the age of 30 is really frightening, ruining life until you get used to it and realize it's okay. So kind of that's where we are still with the net. So I wanted to write about this and look at, among other things, some of our different norms in societies as we do this. And a little brief note on this. You here in Sweden and Scandinavia, as I understand it, post your incomes and taxes and all that online. That freaks the hell out of Americans. We can't imagine that. And in Switzerland, politicians who've posted their income have gotten in trouble for it. I spend a lot of time in Germany trying to improve my 0.1 German. I never succeed. And I'm fascinated by it as a laboratory about privacy and publicness. The Germans, according to media and government, freaked out about Google Buzz and Facebook and Google Street View. And in Germany, a leading politician, Ilse Aigner, urged Germans to petition Google to blur their homes on Street View, leading to, as you know, the Germans love to make up new words for things, the Verpixelungsrecht, the right to be pixelated. 440,000 Germans asked Google to do this, and when Street View came out, waggish friends of mine on Twitter dubbed their country Blurmany. And when I looked at it at first, I thought, oh, this is cute, this is funny, but I actually was just disturbed by it. It was kind of a desecration of the digital landscape. It was pictures taken from a public street of a public view that now said, no, you can't see that. That's disturbing to me, that we should try to control knowledge. Now, in the United States, of course, we have our own odd ways. We think we're the whole world, so we don't think they're odd. But, there, if you're, for instance, arrested for a crime, your picture will appear before everybody right away. Over here, things are a little bit different. I wonder, too, whether there is emerging a bit of an internet culture that may change. I talked to some editors at Die Zeit in Hamburg, and one of them said, you're not wrong about us and Germans and privacy, but he said, my daughters don't operate like a German. My daughters operate like a citizen of the net. So is there a culture emerging here? I went through some difficulty trying to define privacy. Privacy might sound very clear and obvious, but actually, as you dig into it, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And these days, it tends to be rather an empty vessel about fear, worry, concern about this net and what's happening to us. As I went through, I came to this conclusion at the end, and I started to see privacy, I think, as an ethic. It is an ethic of knowing someone else's information. Once I tell Magnus something, what happens to it is now on his shoulders. It's his responsibility. It is public to that extent. He has to decide whether what I told him I want to keep between us, or whether he should repeat it. If he does repeat it, why is he doing that? Is it a benefit to me? Is it to hurt me? Is it to benefit him? What's the context of that discussion? All of that happens in Magnus's head. It's out of my control. If you're a company, Facebook or a bank or Sony, you have additional responsibilities to hold information securely for people. All of that matters. Privacy is an ethic of knowing, and I believe publicness is an ethic of sharing. I'm not suggesting that you have to share everything or you should share everything. That would just be noise. But there comes a moment when you decide whether to share something. And that moment, I think, is about generosity. Is there some reason that someone could have some benefit out of what you might share? Back to my penis. Why the hell would I tell the world that it didn't work? Right? What possible good could come from that? Well, I got support from friends who'd had the same operation that I didn't even know it had the operation. I got information I couldn't possibly have gotten. And I got the opportunity to inspire other men to go get tested for prostate cancer. The only thing that happened to me in this process, nothing bad happened. One guy on a blog, a guy who didn't like me anyway, who disagreed with me anyway, came on and accused me of oversharing. That's a really odd concept when you think about it, because what was he saying to me was, shut up. Right? I don't want to hear you say this, so don't say it. Well, what an obnoxious thing to do, to tell someone not to talk, not to say what they want to do. The truth is, I wasn't guilty of oversharing. He was guilty of overlistening. Because all you have to do in the architecture of the net today is unfollow me, defriend me, don't click on me. But let me be me. Let me talk. That, by the way, is the ethic of privacy as defined by the two attorneys who wrote the key essay in 1890, the right to be let alone. Well, that includes a right to be let alone to say what you want to say. So I think it's important to investigate not just the dangers of privacy, but also, and the benefits of privacy, but also the benefits of publicness. There are many benefits I've found to being public. Once again, I'm not saying that you should all be public all the time. No one should be. But when you are, good things come of it. The best and most important part is relationships. The fact that I can be here and meet you only happens because I blather on Twitter and blogs and such. It improves the relationships that a company has, which I think is vital for companies to learn how to operate transparently by default. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Obviously, being public has enabled things like crowdsourcing, the miracle of Wikipedia. In America, the big encyclopedia was Encyclopedia Britannica, and only a week ago they announced that they're going to stop production in print. Some people lamented that. I said, hallelujah, they've made the transition to become a digital company, and the knowledge that was encased in those pages permanently is now freed in Wikipedia. Being public with our knowledge enables that. I think that being public disarms this notion of perfection that we have, that comes from the industrial era, that everything had to be made just right, and we only had one opportunity to make it. And if we didn't get it right, well, we'll act like it is right, and we'll create a marketing message that says it's great. Well, now we have Google doing things as betas. And when Google releases something as a beta, what it's saying is, this thing is not perfect, it is incomplete, please help us finish it. It is a call to work together. I think that publicness can help disarm stigmas. Gays and lesbians in the United States, and I think around the world, had as their very best weapon publicness. And I'm not suggesting for a second that anyone should be forced out of their own closet. But those who had the courage to stand out of the closet and face the bigots head on and say, you got a problem with this? As we say in New York. We're able to beat down that stigma and beat them back into their own closets of hate and fear. Publicness has that political benefit. It allows us to organize. One of the rules I have in the book about how to be public is the Cabernet Rule, which is to say that one should not tweet or blog or do anything like that after having too much Cabernet. I have found the loophole to my own law, and a few nights after a few too many glasses of Pinot Noir, I came to my keyboard in the midst of the American fight over our alleged debt crisis, and I was pissed off. And so since somebody's already broken the F barrier, I'll say it here, I sat down to my keyboard and I said, fuck you, Washington. It's our money, it's our economy, and you're messing with it. And people did the wrong thing then on the internet. They encouraged me. So I kept doing it. And so I said, you know, we ought to have a Twitter chant, F you Washington, F you Washington. And somebody said, no, you idiot, that's a hashtag. Duh. So thus was born, fuck you Washington. Now people got mad at me, some did, because they said that I was not being specific in my blame to one person or one party, that I was falling into the American Tea Party trap of being mad at all government and trying to restrict all government. But I learned something very important. What actually happened was that people finished the sentence. In 110,000 tweets that followed, people said things like, F you, Washington, for not letting my parents know whether they can pay their bills next month. F you, Washington, for not letting me marry who I want to. F you, Washington, for not being able to negotiate any better than a 3-year-old. And so that experience taught me how to interpret Occupy Wall Street a few weeks later. Because here was this amorphous idea behind a hashtag with no spokesman, no creed, no website, no leader, no organization, no structure that gathered people around the US and then around the world. It was an empty vessel of frustration. And the people who filled it with, finished the sentence with their views, discerned the meaning of it. And thus we got the 99% and the 1%. So publicness enables us, once again, to find, form, and act as publics, and that is a huge power. Finally, the greatest benefit, I think, of publicness for companies and organizations is the opportunity it creates to collaborate. And I want to tell you about a few companies that enable this. There's one in the US called Local Motors. Local Motors is a collaboratively designed car company, and that sounds utterly absurd. When I wrote about this notion in What Would Google Do, some people there made fun of me and said, well, that's the creation of the Homer. Do you have the show The Simpsons here? Okay, so Homer Simpson designed a car that had 2 bubbles, each sealed so the kids were in the back one so you couldn't hear them. It had, I think, handcuffs and leg irons. It had shag carpeting and as many cup holders as you could imagine. So some of my readers said, this is absurd, Jarvis. A collaboratively designed car will be the Homer. Or perhaps, pardon me, it might be a Saab. I'm sorry, I've had 2 Saabs. I love my Saab. I love them dearly. I was in one yesterday and it was so sad it's not here anymore. But you can't resist the joke with the key over here. And the look of it. Well, Local Motors Local Motors creates collaboratively designed cars. They have a plant of 41 people in Arizona. They use a lot of off-the-shelf parts. They do it openly. They had a contest for the first design. A kid who hadn't yet finished design school won $20,000. Then people started designing the parts around the car, including collaboratively designing the tail light. And somebody designed a tail light. Everybody said, "Oh, it's beautiful, man, I must have it." And the president of the company, Jay Rogers, who's responsible for making safe and economically viable cars, said to the public there, "Well, okay, it's beautiful, I agree, but if you want it, I gotta warn you, it's gonna add $1,000 to the cost of every car." And the community said as one, "Never mind." And they instead chose a Honda taillight lens that cost $75, and I'd never know it, and it worked. Well, there is a community of customers. There can be such a thing. A community of customers who operated collaboratively with the company with design and economic decisions because they were given the trust and the tools and the means to do so. That's what Publicness enables as a company. Kickstarter is a great company in the US that enables you to go in and tell the public that you want to make a product, a movie, a journalistic effort, a book, and then your customers, your future customers, can come in and pledge money to order the product. They don't get equity, they get the product in the future. And one company, the first big success, huge success, was making a watch band for the iPod Nano, and he needed $60,000 to be safe. He got $980,000 in pre-orders. Now, what fascinates me about that is by operating in public that way, before the product is even made, this company was able to use its customers' capital and reduce its risk to zero and do the best possible market research you could imagine. He actually had people buying the product. That comes from operating in public. And I think that we have to find ourselves now in an age when companies have to try to operate in public by default. I'm not saying that every secret you have should be known, but would you rather be known as the company that has secrets or that has a great and open and collaborative relationship with your customers? I would certainly be the latter today. Mark Zuckerberg does not think that he is changing human nature. He believes that he is enabling human nature, and I agree with him. We want to be public. We want to share. We want to connect. That's why you stand out there talking to everybody. That's why 845 million people have joined Facebook, not because they're all drunk on Cabernet. And he also believes that every company must become social. And look what's happened. Gaming became social through Zynga. Music has become social in Google Plus and Facebook in terms of sharing songs there, and that's the new way to sell songs. See, music industry, the internet's not bad. Newspapers are trying to become social with a social reader there. Everything will become social because we already are. It's the companies that weren't. And it's the companies get to catch up with us because of that. Government, too, should become open by default. Government, more than anything else, should be transparent by default and secret by necessity. It's the opposite today. Government is secret by necessity and open by force. Whether that force is Julian Assange, a name known around here, or a reporter, or a Freedom of Information Act request, or a whistleblower, it happens. But I think one of the lessons of Wikipedia in terms of the United States government was the banality of secrecy. How much is kept secret from us of our business that didn't need to be kept secret, that in fact had value when it came out. Indeed, some of the revelations out of Wikipedia helped lead to the Arab Spring in Tunisia. So I think that government must change and must become public by default, and we should demand that. So there are a few different levels here of publicness. There is us as individuals. Well, to me, the essence of publicness and privacy is all about choice, that we should have a choice. I would hope that people, when they realize they have this choice, will recognize the benefits that can come from publicness so that they also become generous in their sharing. Sharing is a very important word in this discussion. We keep on talking about the internet as if it's a medium. It's not. As if it's a threat to privacy. Well, it doesn't have to be. The real reason the internet exists, the real reason it takes off, the real reason we love it is because it creates the opportunity to share and to connect. And that's what we want to do. So at an individual level, that's a choice. At a company level, I think that being open and transparent is a wise choice they should make. Once again, so they build relationships and collaboration. At a government layer, I think that publicness, transparency, openness should be mandatory. We should be demanding that. Now, there are certain necessary secrets still. Security, citizens' privacy, criminal investigations, some diplomacy. But beyond that, the work of government is the work of the people, and why is it not done in public? Indeed, I think that government fancies itself the best protector of privacy, when in fact, I think it is the worst potential enemy of privacy. Because government can do things with our information that no one else can do. It has the power of taxation and prison, the law, and for that matter, armies. And so I think we've got to be watching government. But what we're seeing right now is a rush of efforts to regulate the net. Eric Schmidt said in a speech in Europe a few weeks ago that 10 years ago, 4 nations in the world censored the internet, now 40 do. We are seeing a huge rush of efforts to regulate the net under the guises of piracy, privacy, security, decency, even civility. Nicolas Sarkozy thinks that he needs to civilize the internet, that he has to tame it. He ran the EG8 in Paris last year. I had the privilege of being able to sneak in and the further privilege of being able to ask him a question. And impertinent though I was, I asked him to take a Hippocratic oath for the net, that is, first do no harm. And he dismissed it in a very French way. And said, well, you think it's harmful for us to protect your copyright and your children and your privacy? Well, it depends, Mr. President, on how you do it. In Germany, as you saw, as I mentioned before, they've one provincial privacy executive or commissioner has suggested that the like button on Facebook should be illegal. There is an effort to do not track, as you know, get an affirmative response to cookies across Europe, which sounds good, but I think could have devastating impact on the economics of media. And right now, Viviane Reding, Vice President of the EC and Justice Minister, as you all know, I'm sure, has new proposed privacy regulations that are out there. And I want to talk about that for just a moment. They all sound good, and some of them are good, but I think that they bring a lot of unintended consequences and dangers. One of her pillars for this is the right to be forgotten, which sounds wonderful. Sure, forget me. But that has a huge possible impact on the speech of others. Go back to Magnus. Once I've told Magnus something, once we've interacted over a piece of data, a piece of information, then we both have an ownership stake in the result of that conversation. And if I demand that that conversation be erased, then I've affected his speech. And that's true of media and other things. Another pillar is that she wants privacy by default. Again, sounds very good. But if the law of the land were privacy by default, we would not have Twitter. We would not have Flickr. We would not have a lot of what we have. There's an argument that the information about Europeans should be held worldwide into the standards of the EU. Again, sounds magnificent, and I would trust the EU with that more than other countries, but that's just the problem. If you change the architecture of the net to accede to that regulation, then you give the same power to China or Iran, and I don't want that. She asks for transparency. I'm all for that, but I'm not sure that it's necessary yet legislatively to require companies to make them allow everything about a customer be taken away. Again, because there's an interaction, or be forgotten. That is to say, Amazon knows what I've bought. I can kill my account on Amazon. I can ask to kill all that stuff, but can I tell Amazon that they've got to erase every transaction out of their business? Seems odd to me. In India, they've looked to try to get the internet censored for decency. In Australia and Canada, there are efforts right now to filter all content on the internet to get to child porn. Child porn, God knows, is a terrible and awful thing, but we already have laws to regulate it. And my fear is that if we try to change the architecture of the net again to filter all content, all behaviors, then we get to the good ones as well as the bad ones. That's the danger of regulating technology. That's the danger of seeing evil in technology. Regulate the behavior, not the technology. Because if you try to regulate the technology to get to the behavior, you regulate all behaviors that technology can do. Elsa Aigner from Germany again has said that henceforth the use of facial recognition and geodata together is taboo. Once more, it makes sense to the sound of it. But imagine how those two technologies together could help find missing children, or after an earthquake in Haiti or a tsunami in Japan could help find missing people. To regulate the technology, to fear the technology before we even know what it can do is dangerous, and that's the danger I see happening here. So who will protect our internet? Is it a company? I'm a certified Google fanboy, having written What Will Google Do? Now out in paperback. And I think Google does wonderful things, but I don't think that Google is our best protector because it has to, it's a company. It has to protect its own interests first. That is its responsibility. Do I trust governments to protect the internet? No, because once we say that one government has this power, then all governments have that power, including tyrannies. So I think what we need today is to have a discussion about the principles of an open society and the tools of publicness that enable it. And let me just make a brief comment on the speed of this change that we're going through. The accepted wisdom is that the change we're undergoing right now is happening at a very fast pace, right? How many of you think that we're going through a lot of change very quickly? Right, I thought that too. But I'm now coming to question that. I'm now coming to believe that the change we're undergoing is actually happening very, very slowly. That's to say we're only at the bare beginning of it. We don't yet know its full shape, which is what makes it dangerous to regulate it to our present views. Elizabeth Eisenstein, who's the key scholar on Gutenberg, says that the book did not begin to take on its own shape until 50 years after it was invented. It was still using, at the beginning, it was using scribal fonts meant to mimic the scribe's handwriting. Printing was called automated writing. We always see the future in the analog of the past. Cars in English were called horseless carriages till we came up with a word for it. Right? Why are we still calling this a phone? My kids never talk on it. Right? It's something new and we don't have a word for it yet. So I think that, Eisenstein also said it took a century for the impact of the internet to be fully understood on society. And that impact was huge. John Naughton, a columnist at The Observer in London, asked his readers to imagine themselves pollsters on a bridge in Mainz in the year 1472, which is about as far away from the printing press's invention as we are today from the distribution of the commercial web. And he said, ask them there in Mainz whether they think that Gutenberg's little invention down the street will cause the disruption of the Catholic Church, spark the Reformation, fuel something we'll know to be called the scientific revolution, change our idea of education and thus childhood itself. And I would add, change our notion of nations. Nah, not going to happen. You're going too far. Right? I'm often told when I talk about the internet that I go too far. I don't think I go far enough, and I certainly don't know how far to go. So I certainly don't think that regulators are in a position to say what the internet should stop and be. We've got to let it be. We've got to keep changing it. So I would like to see a discussion about principles. Let me end with this, and then I hope come out and have a conversation with you all about this. Again, sorry, it's in English. Principles of an open, these are not the right principles, these are just mine. And I don't want to have one set of principles, I want a discussion. But I believe that we need to look at the idea of a right to connect. In Finland, next door, of course, they've made that a constitutional right. I'm not suggesting that every nation should pay for every internet connection, but certainly when you cut off someone's internet connection, Mr. Mubarak, you are violating someone's human rights. Can we at least agree to that? And if it is a human right to connect and not be disconnected, that is a preamble to what we in the United States call our First Amendment, a right to speak. And that is a necessary condition for the next, which is a right to assemble and act, Occupy Wall Street. I believe that privacy is an ethic of knowing, publicness is an ethic of sharing. I believe that what's public is a public good, and one diminishes it at the cost of the public. When Germans say that Google should not take pictures of a public view from a public street, what is public knowledge is thus reduced, and that is a cost. I believe that our institutions' information should be open by default and closed by necessity. Not individuals, institutions. And I believe, put it this way, that all bits are created equal. That is to say, if one bit on the net can't go from here to here because it is detoured or stopped, whether that's by a government or a cable company, then no bits can be presumed to be free. And finally, the internet is open and distributed by the very architecture of it, and that means that it's got to stay that way. And no one can claim sovereignty over the internet, or it's not the internet anymore. The internet is a vast, amazing, disruptive new thing. Disruption is scary and it's painful, but it's also beautiful and magnificent. And I just hope that we can maintain this tool, see where it takes us, changing our view of life, and creating new connections just like this. And so I'd love to have a conversation with you all about that. And I'll come out. In the US, we would call this playing Oprah. I don't know if that's a reference. So please, challenge me, ask questions, anything, anyone. Don't give me that embarrassing moment when nobody raises their hand. Please, someone. Hey, thank you. Talk. I'm sorry, I was driving you crazy enough with the camera. I'm going to do it worse now. Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm going to have to pick up on the fact that you refer to the Constitution. Is there a risk, and this is me playing devil's advocate, so I don't actually disagree with you, is there a risk of this being some form of kind of digital American imperialism where all these values are American as opposed to global?
Great question. And when anyone says that, that means they're buying time to come up with an answer. Yes, there is a risk of that. And I ask myself whether these values are, it's conveniently American and internet seem to go together. But I don't think so, because I think what I see is people using this tool to do things that surprise me. When Craig Newmark started Craigslist, you can recognize a platform when people use it in ways you never could have guessed, right? If Microsoft had invented Craigslist, they would have created a very long manual and a very long tools of use and a little talking paperclip to tell you how to use it. Craig Newmark didn't do that. Craigslist just started, people used it. They used it after Katrina to find jobs and homes and each other. You know it's a platform when people use it in their own way. So I think that the internet enables people to be free. Is that an American value? It happens to be, but I think it should be a value of all humanity. Next. That side too, I'll come over there.
You talked a lot about the European commissioners and politicians. Do you think that politicians might be uneducated or too uneducated to take decisions or make decisions around these technology issues?
I think that's the charitable view, which says that then it's up to all of us to educate them. The other view is that they are perhaps going to be the most disrupted in society, and they recognize that and they fear that. And we certainly have seen that Mubarak shut off the internet. Sorry, man, didn't work. It backfired on you, beginning to the end. So I think we should presume the first, that they need more education, we should educate them, but we should also be wary of them. That's what I'm saying. Ah, good, okay. I got the new Nike Fuel Band. I want to get my fuel up. Where was that hand? Hello there. Would you mind passing that? Thank you.
I wanted you to say something about China. I was interested in when you were talking about future innovation, and Europe is weakening the economy, and also the U.S. How do you look in China as a country of innovation, and also as a country with power in 10, 20 years to come?
I must confess, I look at it with too much ignorance. By far, I think Anita is quite right that Americans are not good at languages or the rest of the world. I'm trying to get rid of that echo, sorry. And so I don't know fully. I do resent what the Chinese government does in censoring the internet and not allowing Twitter there, not allowing Facebook there. I do not believe for a second that that is what any people would want. I think it shows a gross lack of respect for the people to make their own decisions. And so at that level, simplistic, I admit, I think that Google was wrong to go into China and right to come out of China. And it stood by a principle. And I think that other companies should not be helping China build the Great Firewall, which some are doing out of America. I think the first principle here is human freedom. Now then beyond that, China is a force, of course, that anyone would belittle at their own risk. It's going to be a tremendous force, tremendous matter of innovators, a huge economic force, and I think the more that the Chinese people can be integrated into this great connection machine of ours, the better. Next. Anyway, oh, come on. Oh, there we go. Okay, good.
First of all, I need to compliment you on your opera skills. You're doing great.
Thank you.
I have a question about corporations and large organizations who are starting to realize that large part of their business is online. They're living in a social world and they have to be social. Do you have any examples of large corporations who are actively participating in the discussion about openness, besides those who are sort of protecting their own business like Google?
Right. I'll give you two examples. And Magnus, you're going to tell me when I'm out of time, right? One is Best Buy in the US, the largest electronics retailer there. And it's the only one left. So you'd think it says, well, we won, but no, they realize that retail is under huge disruption in the US. Because Amazon enables you to get any product. There's no opacity of pricing now. Prices are transparent. You can get anything from anywhere. So what Best Buy has done is some interesting things socially. One, they created an API so that anyone, you, can start your own electronics store on top of what they do. And they become your back end. They become your Amazon, right? Two, they created a Twitter hashtag called Twelp Force. Horrible word made up by a marketing agency. It stands for Twitter Help Force. Twelp Force. It's almost like a Swedish word. Twelp Force. And I'm jealous. I love your language dearly. I'm awful with languages. I love listening to it and not knowing a damn thing you're saying. So at 12 Force, they have 3,000 employees behind one Twitter account. And so what it means, and I've used it this way, I needed to buy a phone for my father who's hard of hearing and never answers his phone when I try to call him. So I went on there and I said, what do I buy? And I got answers within minutes. Now, some of them were wrong, but I got a right answer in the end. And companies are afraid of having their employees speak directly to the public. Here is a company that enables that and recognizes the value in that. And I think that's very important. So it's a small example. Beyond that, I would also say that I work in the newspaper business. I teach journalism at the City University of New York. I teach entrepreneurial journalism, which is not an oxymoron. And I work with some newspaper companies. I'm an advisor for a company called Digital First Media in the US. A brilliant man named John Payton is the head of it now. He runs the second largest group of newspapers in the US. And what he's done is said that we have to become a digital company. We have to push everything, audience, advertisers, content, everything onto online. But he's done things where he's done it very much in public. He's blogged about it. He just blogged about all the complaints his staff had about technology. And they've opened up in some of their places their news meetings. They've opened up their newsrooms, which has become a trend in the US now. Also happening, I think, in Czechoslovakia, where the public can come into the newsroom, which can be good and bad. So you see shining moments of this happening, I think. Do we have time for one more, or am I done? One more. Okay, good. All right, you're in the middle of the aisle, this way. Can you pass that down, please?
So let's say we would create sort of a worldwide board that were to create the rules that we would live by on the internet. And not to have a corporation or a state owning that. Could we let the world vote for the rules? And would the good side sort of win?
Right. I think we're already there. See, that's the point. The internet is not broken. It's been operating just fine for the last couple decades. Why are there so many efforts to fix it? Because those who would fix it are frightened of it, I would argue. The architecture of the net is that law set. Lawrence Lessig, a brilliant professor at Harvard University, says code is law. Because when you write code, you're writing the law of how something operates. The architecture of the net is its law. Even though I want a discussion about principles, I don't want a UN commission for the internet. I don't want an elected body over the internet. I want the internet as an architecture to be free as a platform for anyone to do what they want to do. Final point. Is it guaranteed those will be good things? Absolutely not. After Gutenberg's press was invented, I took a pilgrimage to the Gutenberg Museum in Mainz last year. And in the same case are the indulgences that led to the Reformation and Martin Luther's tracts against it, and political tracts from both sides of a fight in Mainz right after the press was invented. The technology in that sense is agnostic. It can be used for good or bad, and that's just the point. We all have choices about how to use the internet. And those choices aren't just about being frightened of it. Those choices are about trying to use it really well, but that has to be an active choice we make. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. And, well, yes, join me on stage. Thank you, Jeff. I will give you a fisheye lens for your cell phone.
Oh, I've been wanting one of these.
Right.
Tack så mycket. Tack så...
Varsågod. Tack så mycket. Varsågod. Just a final question. You're from me, a great speech and a lot of inspiration and thoughts around your newest book. Your previous book was called, as you mentioned, What Would Google Do? A lot of people right now, I guess, is asking themselves, what would Apple do? That is the new question. What is wrong with that question?
In my last book, did I say it was in paperback now? I said that Apple is the grand exception to all rules, and it violates every possible rule that Google presents. The next book, called Public Parts, out now.
And not in paperback.
Not paperback yet. It'll happen soon. Some wags said I should call it What Would Facebook Do, because it's all about social and connections and so on. There, too, Apple violates the rules. Right? Apple is very closed. It's not collaborative. It's secretive. It's controlling. It's all those things. How could it get away with being that? Because it was that fucking good. Right? If you can be that fucking good, you can violate the rules. But there was only one Steve Jobs, may he rest in peace.
And normally the advice for all of us, the rest of us, isn't that we're probably not that good.
I don't think so. You can try to be. God bless, try to be.
We're working on it.
I got it.
Great, thank you, and thanks for the connection with the audience here, and thank you very much. Hang on, Jeff. Jeff, just a second to see if there's any questions from either Twitter, Katarina, Miriam?
No questions, but loads of tweets.
Failed.
Loads of tweets.
Loads of tweets and one-liners from your talk. Everyone's really inspired. And someone is saying that you should be sent to the Swedish government to talk about these questions. And they're also complimenting you on that you're not using a PowerPoint or a presentation. It could be interesting anyway. So, thanks.
And any comments or thoughts from you guys?
So you mean we have to not fear the future, we have to embrace it, or?
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
And once again, as gentlemen here said, bad people could win, bad things could happen, but that's always been true in life, yeah? That's what civilization and society are all about, so embrace it.
We also have we have a choice that you always say.
Exactly. That's the whole point. And let's know what the full choice is.
Therese, one more.
I held a conference the other year. It was an IT conference. There were government representatives, CEOs, IT people. And I talked about open data, APIs, collaboration, and crowdsourcing. And after the conference, a man came up to me and said, "That is the most naive I have ever heard." And I just wanted to say that I feel now very equipped with tools and arguments so that I can, reply to a guy like that again.
Great. Welcome to the club of naivete. May it grow and prosper.
Thanks.